Hello, marketers. Hope you're doing fine. First of all, thank you so much for giving love to the Marketing Soul Great Marketers Club. Club is growing and we are getting strong with passionate marketers onboarding every day. And it is amazing to see. And very soon we will be going by the invite only membership. So those who has not joined yet, please join. You're going to have the best of the experiences in the marketing community ever. Link is in the description. Today, Dr. Mrinmoy Bhattacharjee, Associate Professor of Marketing at Alliance University, is with us to share his wisdom of knowledge on the marketing concepts which needs revision by marketers. Welcome, Dr. Mrinmoy, to hashtag Marketers Lead Talk. Amazing to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me today and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and opinions on this platform. Thank you so much.
It is amazing to have you on the board as our community mentor and being a professor, of course, you are our sir. So I would start it with the same thought only. So let's start with the basic concept for a understanding and taking the conversation forward. So what is actually the bottom of pyramid concept and the issues which are faced in it?
In fact, bottom of pyramid in abbreviated form, we call it as a BOP market. This has been there since almost last 50 years. But in order to get into the mainstream and being accepted as a subject in B schools and other institutions, it took some time. It is around only 2004 or 5 it got introduced as a subject in B schools, in many global B schools. Now the concept of BOP probably is today known to everybody. I mean, as this is not a very new concept. Technically, if you want me to define it, then there is a World Bank definition of who are in the bottom of the pyramid. Since it is a pyramid, so obviously the pyramid is very sharp on the top and very broad at the bottom. So it's all about the world population, their income, their lifestyles. So it's quite obvious that people who are on the top, they are very fraction of the population, maybe even 1% of the world population. They are the rich people, they are the elite people. The middle of the pyramid consists of the global middle class, of course, the growing global middle class. And the bottom, of course, includes the largest population of the world, which is basically poor. Now, this concept doesn't end here, and it is not that simple to understand. When you deep dive into the concept, you see that the bottom of the pyramid, which we call as a market of poor, or I prefer to call it as a deprived market. Maybe later on during the discussion, I'll tell you why I prefer to call it as a deprived market. This bottom of the pyramid market actually has many segments. It's not a one segment. To give you a bit of perspective, consider, there are different categories of poor. Poor who are extremely poor, right? Who do not have even access to basic necessities of life, water, shelter, food. This is one category. Poor who have probably access to basic necessities of life, but then they do not have access to education, right? Poor who have access to even primary education, but they do not have access to skill-based education. So there are different segments in these categories. And any business can choose any segment from these categories and serve any of their needs in the best possible way. But obviously, this is a very challenging task, right? Because first of all, these markets are highly inefficient markets. There are a lot of deterrents in the market, inhibitors in the market, naturally built over decades or probably even centuries, because they have been neglected over many decades, right? And now coming to the again definition of this bottom of the pyramid or deprived market, according to World Bank, people who earn below $2 per day, they are called as poor, and those who earn below $1 per day, they are called as the poorest of poor. But the problem is there has been quite a bit of ambiguity while defining this bottom of the pyramid, because there are people who earn around $3 to $10 per day also, but unable to afford globally traded goods. Now, what do you call them? They are also not able to afford globally traded goods and services, so they probably also fall in this category. So there is a fair amount of ambiguity even today. So that's why I personally prefer to call it as the deprived markets. Markets where there is economic poverty, there are infrastructural, deficiency, technological deficiency, healthcare deficiency, education related deficiency, nourishment related deficiency. So these are all together, you can put all these together and call them as a deprived market. So that's why I prefer to call it deprived market. Now, as I told you, there are multiple challenges with the deprived market. One is very obvious, and that is this: they suffer from resource scarcity. They do not have resource. But apparently people say that they suffer from resource scarcity. But if you look at even the poorest countries or economies in the world, this is a very insightful research done by Hernando de Soto some time back. And he found out that he's an economist, of course, and he found out that the markets which are called as the poorest market of the world also, they are actually not poor. I mean, you can call them as a capital poor, but they are actually asset rich. Let me just give you a perspective. For example, if you take Mexico, I'm talking about Mexico 15, 20 years back, right? In Mexico itself, there are assets which they call as the trapped assets. Now, these countries are asset rich, but they are capital poor because there are no framework or legal contractual framework available which can convert these assets into, or monetize these assets or convert them into capital. So that's why they are poor, right? They are not asset poor. So he has actually calculated almost 15, 20 years back that in Mexico itself, there would be around $300 billion of trapped assets, which they are unable to actually convert into capital because of lack of any form of legal framework or contractual framework, right? Similarly, in a country like Egypt, also there would be near about $200 billion of trapped assets. So you can imagine about countries like India and many other countries, right? So this is one thing. They are considered to be very resource scarce, but probably they are not if you are able to tap them in a proper way. Second thing is there's a problem of scale. How do you scale? Because these markets are very heterogeneous in nature, right? They are not in one place. Now, if you talk about this particular bottom of the pyramid market or the deprived market, this is around 4 to 4.5 billion people in the world. And I would not say that this market is still a virgin market. It is not a virgin market. Much of that is, in fact, significant portion of that is already tapped by companies like, Nestle or Unilever or even India, ITC, and all these companies have already tapped this market, right? And there is one more challenge which we call as the consumer ignorance. People are not aware in those markets. So in order to sell them products or services, you need to make them aware. You need to also convert them into responsible and accountable consumers. Suppose, just for example, if you want to sell some kind of microfinance products to them, because they are not financially disciplined, they don't have a habit of saving. There is very high chance that they would become a defaulter. So how do you really there are many cases where businesses have become successful by actually converting them from very unorganized kind of customers to very responsible and accountable customers. Right? Even in India, we have lot many examples like that. Then, as I told you, it's a highly inefficient market. You have inefficiency in terms of delivery, last mile connectivity, understanding of people about the market, technology, infrastructure, everything. It's a completely inefficient market. In fact, if I quote Professor Tarun Khanna of Harvard Business School, he calls them as a void. Void means there's a space which exists between the chain of business, which needs to be filled if you want to really create value. So there are voids. You need to fill those voids, right? Probably there are voids in supply chain. There are voids in logistics. There could be voids in marketing. There could be voids in a lot of places. These are inefficiencies. These are points of inefficiencies because of which these markets are not being able to tap in a very effective way, right? And then the most important thing is that the businesses which aim this market, the bottom of the pyramid market, they should aim this market with a motive of service. That does not mean doing some kind of charity. Of course, it's a profitable market, but then the motive should be service. To transform, unless and until you transform these poor people into middle class, you are not going to get people who are going to be highly profitable. Again, the concept of lifetime value of customer that we know in marketing, right? So if you want to have more lifetime value of customer, you have to help them grow, help them gain more economic importance, economic sustainability with your business, right? and then probably move them to the middle class layer, and then serve them in a better way, earn more profit. So in a brief, this is all about bottom of pyramid market.
That's right, and it's quite elaborative. And the point that you mentioned around filling the void and making them literate about the concept and the products, so which is quite necessary. So I agree to that absolutely. So how to overcome then those challenges in the bottom of pyramid? What are the solutions that you would recommend?
Uh, See, there are already solutions which have been discussed in the book that usually being considered as a guidebook for the bottom of the pyramid when we teach in universities and B schools. So that guidebook actually is written by C.K. Prahalad, who passed away a few years back. He's again an Indian origin professor. Probably, yeah, you must be aware of him. Of
He's
this
a
name.
guru.
So he's yes, absolutely. So he's the one who has actually written, the guidebook of this subject, bottom of the pyramid, by title called as "Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid." That means the fortune is there at the bottom of the pyramid. That's what he wanted to say to the business, right? So today, I think most of the businesses are focusing on next 4 billion customers, not the current 2 billion customers. I mean, 20 years things have changed,
That's
right?
right.
So C.K. Prahlad's contributions are really, most significant contribution in this field, right? But in recent times, while exploring, because I teach this subject in my business school, and I got an opportunity to even design this syllabus. So I designed it in probably I've tried to design it in the most contemporary way. So I included a lot of recent books, and I included a lot of recent startup stories. Those were basically tech-based startups in rural Africa, in Latin America, in South Asia. So there are great stories around, and there are tech companies. There are tech companies which are really catering to this segment of the market, right? Now, if I go according to C.K. Prahalad, there are 12 principles very clearly narrated by him. These are 12 principles on which actually you can cater to this market. But I prefer to include some more which are more contemporary in nature, probably more relevant in today's time. First and foremost, I would say that you need to have a creator mindset. If you are a tech-based company and today most of the companies are tech-based companies, and we are creating tech-based products, right? So if you are trying to even create a mobile-based, say for example microfinance product, right? In such markets. So the first thing is that you need to have a creator's mindset. You cannot have a disruptor mindset. The entrepreneurs who operate in this kind of market, they are actually creators, because I'll tell you why this creator. The reason is that you can be called as a disruptor when you disrupt a existing industry. And as we all know that disruptive innovation is coined by Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School, and he wrote the great book Innovator's Dilemma, right? There he mentioned that in order to disrupt, you need an existing industry. Problem is that in most of these places, what we are talking about, deprived markets, there is no industry at all. It doesn't exist. So what will you disrupt? There's nothing to disrupt. You need to be a creator. So you have to start with a creator mindset. You have to start building it from the scratch. So that's the first principle of this market, right? So naturally, when you are starting as a creator, you will not have a first mover advantage, right? You will have a first mover disadvantage in this type of markets, right? Because you will face all the initial friction of this industry, right? You will not have any infrastructure. Let me tell you, to give you some perspective on that. Very recently also, there's a data which says that 50% of world population resides in such area where there are no postal codes. I mean, literally, there are no addresses. In Africa, most in UAE, probably last 5 years back also, 6 years back also, there are many places in UAE, there were no buildings, do not have any addresses. How do you deliver, So specifically the logistic companies, they had huge issues because these people used to shop, and 45%, to the tune of 45% of deliveries used to come back, undelivered, because they were not able to trace the buildings, right? So what do you do? So there's a company called as Fetcher, which headquartered in Dubai, of course, but they created across the Middle East countries, right? and they're catering to the Middle East countries, and they started with doing geolocation, right? So did not depend on the building address alone. They started with geolocation. There are many other things. Now, second most important thing, with which you can address this market is that you need to be a full stack company. You cannot be a asset light company. For example, if you take Uber, Airbnb, all these companies, they had actually built their products on the top of already ready-made infrastructure. They had the infrastructure, right? All Silicon Valley companies, they do have infrastructure. They build products on the top of that infrastructure. So they are all basically asset light companies. But in this kind of market, you won't be able to be asset light company because there is nothing available. You have to start building it from the scratch, right? So that's why you have to be a full stack company. So start with the mindset that you have to be a full stack company. Now, when you want to be a full stack company, obviously a small startup will not have all the resources to build a full stack. So then you have to do a lot of collaboration, right? So it's all about collaboration. Third thing, consider your enterprise or company as a camel, not as unicorn. I mean, why not unicorn? Because unicorn grow overnight, as we all know, right? And there's a concept of value of death in startup, which I've shared in some time back in my LinkedIn profile also. That value of death, where you keep funding and you do not have any profit, right? And your graph goes down, growth goes down, because that's the value of death. And most of the startup end up there because they probably never see the profit scenario, right? So you need to be a camel. Why camel? Because a camel can also survive in drought. You need to use your resources in a very, very judicious way, right? Every time you raise your funds, whether Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D, you need to use them in a very judicious way so that you do not end up becoming a unicorn. You cannot grow that way. That's why a camel. Fourth principle, and what I'm discussing right now is these are actually not the principle what C.K. Prahalad initially told. These are all the principle of there are three, 4 books, right? So Alexander Lazaro is the one who has written a book called As Out Innovate. So he's been mentioning all this, right?
Right.
So the fourth principle is So the fourth principle is cross pollination. Since this is one very daunting issue in this kind of companies. Imagine you are operating in a very rural Africa, right? The problem is your market is in rural Africa, but you do not have resources there. Neither you have the talent pool there, right? Neither you have infrastructure. What do you do? So, I mean, should you be there or should you establish your office somewhere in New Jersey or California where you can have all the talent pool? So that's another thing. You need to learn to cross-pollinate, right? And, tap the global talents, and now it is very much possible, right? And the fifth principle is think global from the first day itself. And it's not that you suddenly jump into and say that, today I'm going to, launch in all the countries. That's not possible. But you have to start thinking global right from the first day. So these are a few things, I wanted to discuss about.
That's right.
The BOP market.
Absolutely. I think this would be the way forward for bottom of pyramid working structure that you have recommended. Absolutely. So taking the conversation forward, little deeper, let's discuss more about product innovation or service innovation. How to decide that now the time has come for this product to innovate or.
Absolutely. Now, if I've perceived your question right, then probably you're asking that whether a company should go more for product innovation or service innovation, which would be the right way at this point of time in the present context, right?
Yeah.
So because I am a services marketing professor, my interest lies in services marketing, and I have been reading and researching on services marketing since the last 20 years. And my even PhD is also based on services marketing. So, and that's not the reason I'm advocating for it. The reason is, backed with all data. And the data is in 2019, Apple has earned more than $40 billion from only subscription services, near about $40 billion in 2019. Not by selling of iPhones, not by selling of any products that Apple makes, only from subscription services, right? And this process of earning more from services by a product company, we call it as a servitization. The concept is known as servitization. Now, even you take Rolls-Royce as a company. Rolls-Royce, we all know that design aircraft engines, right? They are very well known for designing aircraft engine, and they supply those engines to all the aircraft companies, manufacturing companies. Now, even if we look into Rolls-Royce revenues and what Rolls-Royce is doing right now, Rolls-Royce is right now not selling any engine to any aircraft company than what they are doing. Now, what they're doing is that they have told all the companies, aircraft companies, right, who are buying engines from them, they told that we are not going to sell the engine. We will, just give you on subscription. You take the engine, right, and right from because the engine is now fitted with all IoT sensors, right? So from the first day, the moment your engine starts functioning, we will be monitoring the engine. You are not responsible as the aircraft, manufacturing or designing company, whether you are Boeing or Airbus, doesn't matter. We will be looking into everything about that engine, whether the engine is functioning properly, when should the engine be replaced, right? And when it should undergo maintenance. So everything will be looked after by Rolls-Royce. And for that, we will be in a very long-term contract with you, right? So this is, there's one more example. There's a company called this MAN Trucks, which designs, you must be aware of the company MAN Trucks, right? Now it's a truck designing and manufacturing company. So it should be essentially selling trucks to, tour operators or tour companies, right? Or transport companies. Now, the MAN Trucks has also stopped selling trucks. What they are saying is that they are going to their, transport companies, big transport companies, and saying that, we will do one thing. We will do your complete fleet management. We don't want to spend unnecessarily on buying trucks. We'll help you, understand how many trucks really you need. Complete fleet management, and we have fitted the trucks with all kind of sensors. If your driver is there on the road and he has left the truck, probably has gone for a lunch or something on the highway, and the truck engine is running, then you will get an SMS and all these things will be solved, right? And if the driver is speeding up beyond a particular limit, also it's like Zoom car, what they do, right? If you because I used to use Zoom car always whenever I used to go outside, of Bangalore. So yes. Once I remember that I was speeding up and I got a SMS saying that you are speeding up, please stop, you'll be penalized. So all this kind of. So MAN Trucks is doing this. So that's probably, answers your question that should we think more about product innovation or service innovation at this point of time. Basic fact is that if you keep aside few products in the world, most of the product market is becoming more like commodities, same kind of features, same kind of, more or less. So how do you differentiate? How do you create more revenue? So services are specifically the option.
I think I can correlate to your example to recent Maruti, Suzuki. I think they have also been launching the, introducing this service feature. Take the car for 4 years with us and pay it per month, kind of a concept. So absolutely. So the gist I can get it. It's more of a service orientation feature that is probably is going to be the future. Perfect. So let's discuss more on marketing concepts. So how many are they, and which one is your favorite?
Oh my God, there are many. There are many. You start from product. You have all concepts in product. Product life cycle. You have different strategies in different stages of life cycle. You have pricing, different strategies, different tactics of pricing. You have promotion. You have integrated marketing communication, right? And then you have a host of other things like Michael Porter strategy, and from Michael Porter's 5 forces, we have now moved to 6 forces, right? Which also include complementers, right? And there are I think, it's a huge subject. It's a colossal area to study marketing, and so probably that's why marketing is now divided into many fragments. There are many divisions of marketing. I have been working in the area of social marketing from long time. This again uses our marketing tool to change behavior of people to more pro-social, attachment. Now, what do you mean by pro-social? Less alcoholism, less addiction to drugs, trafficking. So, in this area specifically, I was working for some time. So obviously, this is area of social marketing. Other than this, since I'm a services marketing professor, and specifically in services marketing, the services marketing mix really excites me. And the special 3 P's of services marketing mix, right, really excites me. This is processes, people and physical evidences. And even out of these 3, if you ask me which are the one you like most, right, I would say people and process. And I'll give you examples for that. Why people and process, right? Many a times we have seen that in today's time, if you look at even consulting firms like McKinsey, where consultants are actually the linchpins. I mean, they are the people who are most critical to the consultancy, right? You need very experienced consultants, right, in order to do consultancy for different continents, might be in Australia, US, Europe, right? They are having deep knowledge about these areas, right? And that's why they're recruited as consultants. But McKinsey, it seems they have a framework where they are more process oriented than individual oriented, or people oriented. I mean, when we are talking about a company and its operation, right? So even if a consultant, highly experienced consultant, leave in between, a project is running and then consultant leaves, who's actually very critical to this project. Even then, it seems McKinsey is able to manage because their framework is so much process oriented, right? That's the reason I like process. And today, since if we are you're sitting and talking on Zoom, I mean, this, of course, we all understand that what kind of process are going behind it, right? There are people who have also written cases on Zoom. I've been also writing small cases and publishing here and there. Probably you are aware of those also, right? I love these two elements of services marketing mix: people and processes. People, because of the reason that I have been always an individual who was very much attached to culture, and I've been writing a lot about culture. Because I do believe that like many others, like for example, Satya Nadella or Bill Gates or even Simon Sinek, right? Culture is actually foundational to any organization, and that's where the people come. Now, when we teach services profit, there's a concept in service called the services profit chain. It's a very interesting concept. I'm sure that you are aware of that. It relates the revenues and profit of a company eventually to the company's culture. So it's a chain. How do you arrive at? How do you reach at revenue and profits? Revenue and profits come from loyal customers, right? How do you get loyal customers? Through satisfying them through your services or products, right? How do you satisfy them? By creating great value, right? Or values which are unparalleled value, right? How do you create value when employees have high productivity? I'm talking about the chain, right? When would your employee have high productivity? When they will be satisfied on their job. When would be they satisfied on their job? When they will be really happy, right? So that's all about this service profit chain. I mean, this is what I have been always attached to. So
absolutely, I do agree with you. If the employee is certified, if I'm not wrong, Vineet Nair, the HCL head, he wrote a book, Employee First and Customer Second. So I can relate to your concept to him, and you made me remind him. I'll buzz him about this conversation and his context. Very nice. So no, since you are a professor, I know we cannot leave you without asking a question on the college life. So how should one should spend their college life if they want to be a successful marketer?
Again, because my disposition, you will find my disposition a lot attached to the professorship, because this is how I have become seasoned now.
Yes.
So some people would find that this man is giving lecture without being solicited also. This keeps happening. So thank you for asking this. Thank you for, and I have very firm opinion on this, the question that you asked me. I have always, there's a growing perception among the students these days that in these schools, the success of your career in coming time depends on the number of internships you do. Because in fact, I used to always encourage students to do internships, right? Because that's one of the way, not one of the ways, it's one of the most valuable way of learning, right? But now what I'm seeing is that actually it is backfiring me. So students are saying that, sir, we'll do more internships. That's actually not the right thing to do, and probably you also know very well. And a lot of entrepreneurs recently also have been writing about it, that people who think that only doing internships would make them learn and fit for a market in future. They are very wrong, because you need books too. And I belong from an industry background. I've been working with telecom industry for some time, right? And I know that how important books are. If you do not have fundamentals clear, I mean, if you work for 20 years, that's the reason people work and then come back, do MBA, and then again go back, right? That's the reason. So academics are as important as your practical experience as an internship, I would say. You should spend fair amount of that. There should be very balanced time that you should spend interacting even with your peers, your classmates, right? Other members in the class, because that's why we build teams in Alliance Business School. Specifically, we build in most of the business school. You'll find the build groups, right? These groups are made to, for the interaction purpose, so that whenever an assignment is given, a project is being given, there's a culture of team, right? And at the end of the day, as Sundar Pichai has told, that was his greatest mistake in life. When he was interviewed for the CEO position in Google. He was asked one question, that what is your greatest failure in life and what have you learned from it? So Sundar told that my greatest failure in life, that I've always believed that hard work will pay me everything, but that's not. I mean, to a certain extent, if you are an individual, you are wanting to become, say, a clerk or a kind of or even a kind of good software engineer, that will do. But if you want to run a company, if you want to be in C-suites, right, you need to learn how to mobilize teams. You need to learn how to organize teams. You need to learn how to influence them. You need to learn how to attract talent from other companies. Satya and both Sundar are well known for this particular thing. They know how to get people from other companies. I remember that Satya Nadella, in fact, when he was appointed as CEO in 2014 in Microsoft, right? He started looking for people, and one of the first people who joined his team was Peggy Johnson. Peggy Johnson was leading actually this mixed reality division in Microsoft. And today she has moved away from Microsoft and joined another company. And then Peggy Johnson was one of the very vital person in actually creating all the mixed reality products in Microsoft. The recent product launch is Microsoft Mesh. We know that. So those qualities are required for a student.
So I agree. I think it has to be a mix, because once your fundamentals are not clear, it is not going to give the right clarity what actually experience can land up to. I agree on that.
Absolutely.
So in a very brief, if you can share, since we are marketers, it would be interesting to know as a professor, what are your favorite marketing campaign? What is your favorite marketing campaign, and what are your learnings out of it?
If you ask me a favorite marketing campaign, I mean, the first on the top of the mind, again, I'm a marketer, so I'll always tell you top of the mind. So obviously, I'm a very culture-centric person. I'm a very people-centric person. I'm a very pro-social person. So that is the reason that obviously there will be a campaign which is very pro-social and at the same time created profitability for the company. So the campaign which right now comes to my mind is the Class of 5 campaign by Lifebuoy. It's a unique campaign that we have seen. Even Tata Tea's campaign was great campaign, but somehow Lifebuoy campaign, the Class of 5, right, is an amazing campaign. The campaign is all about, as we know, that most of the children in developing countries die before the age of 5, right? There's a high infant mortality rate, and one of the reasons, as we know, hygiene, and hygiene again is related to hand wash and all those stuff. Lifebuoy started this campaign some time back, I think almost 10 years back, if I'm not wrong, right? And we have seen all those campaigns of Lifebuoy where children started, and in fact, children are the one who started educating the elders, right? If you remember that called as Haath, Muh and Bum, which was run, I think 6 years or 7 years back, right? Children were actually teaching the adults that you need to wash your hands 3 times a day when you do all this activity, right? And if you look at the business objective being achieved with this colossal business objective, the sale of Lifebuoy hand wash, I mean, I did not tell you, it has picked up like anything. It's a non-linear growth of, and at the same time, and very pressing social issue has been addressed for this campaign. So I would say this is one of the campaigns very close to my heart, and I always discuss this campaign in my class.
Very nice, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mrinmoy, for being with us today. But before we leave, we would like to have your thoughts on the Marketing Soul, our community, passionate marketers. You are a community mentor there. What are your thoughts on it?
First of all, thank you very much, for considering me worthy for that, right? And Marketing Soul, as I told you in the beginning itself, that I see that this is poised to grow. I mean, the kind of initiatives that you're taking now, and the way you are trying to grow is quite unique to other. There are thousands and thousands of this kind of content creator, as we all know, right? That's what people say. The moment you go for funding, they will say how you're unique. I think that your uniqueness is what you are creating right now. This kind of contents. I think people these days, yes, there are people like me who love reading, right? At the same time, people these days, probably love more visual contents, right? And that this is quite evident from the maturing growth of all these edtech companies that we see, right? Live sessions, recorded sessions, and these sessions that what you are doing right now are not mere sessions. These are real good conversation, valuable conversations from where people can really learn, right? So I think Marketing Soul is definitely poised to grow, as I always say. It's definitely poised to grow, and this platform is going to grow very big in coming time. But at the same time, we should not forget that we should keep creating unique value. That's already what you are doing.
Thank you.
And keep looking for avenues.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your kind and motivational words. We will we will do definitely the best of the marketing experience, learning experience that our community can get. I'll put my best energy and put forward towards it. Again, thank you so much, Mrinmoy, for being with us today. And it was an amazing learning from the concepts to case studies and example. I'm sure community is going to love this interaction, and they're going to have a lot of learning out of it. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.